Grace didn't turn immediately. She couldn't. Her breath stalled in her chest as if the winter air had thickened around her. That sound, rich, confident, a little careless, belonged to a world she had once stepped out of without shoes. "Mom." Lily tugged her sleeve gently. "What's wrong?" Grace blinked fast and forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just thought I heard something." She stood, brushing off her knees, but the moment her eyes lifted, her heart lurched. Through the shifting crowd, past a man carrying a gigantic shopping bag, she saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a tailored charcoal coat, perfect leather gloves, a familiar way of standing, weight slightly on his right leg, as if ready to move but never in a hurry. His hair, the same dark brown she used to run her fingers through, caught the glow of the Christmas lights. His jawline looked sharper now, more defined, but the profile, it was unmistakable. Michael, her ex, her billionaire ex, the man who once held her as if she were his whole future, and then vanished from her life before she had the chance to tell him why she'd suddenly disappeared. Her pulse hammered. The crowd shifted again, blocking her view. She felt her legs tremble, not from cold but from a shock so deep it almost hurt. Lily didn't know him. She had never seen him. Not once. Grace had made sure of that, with a mix of fear, pride, and a stubborn belief that Lily deserved stability, not a man who lived in penthouses and private lounges, a world Grace never fit into. But seeing him now, out of nowhere, on this night of all nights, it felt like the universe had opened an old wound with gloved hands. "Mom," Lily whispered, "the lights are starting." Music swelled, warm and bright. People cheered. The tree shimmered with a sudden burst of golden sparks that spiraled upward, igniting every bulb in a wave. Children gasped, couples kissed, phones shot up to record the moment. Grace tried to focus on the tree, but her gaze kept dragging back to the place Michael had stood. And then, she saw him again. This time, he wasn't laughing. He was staring at her, directly, frozen, as if someone had cut the noise from the world and left only the two of them connected by a thread of past and pain. Grace's mouth went dry. She hadn't changed much. Still the same soft brown hair, though she kept it tied back now. Still the same eyes he once said looked warm even on cold mornings. But she wasn't the woman he remembered. Life had carved new things into her. Tiredness, responsibility, fear. Her first instinct was to turn around, grab Lily, and disappear into the crowd. Run, hide, pretend she never saw him. But her feet wouldn't move. "Mom." Lily tugged again, leaning into her side. "Can we get closer?" Grace swallowed hard. "Yeah, sure." They stepped forward, just enough that Lily could see the dancers beginning their performance near the base of the tree. Drums thumped. Lights flashed. Snow machines sprinkled white powder that drifted through the air like real flakes. Grace tried to keep her focus on Lily, but she felt Michael moving. Closer, through the people, through the world she had fought so hard to escape. Panic fled. She tightened her grip on Lily's hand. He stopped only a few feet behind her. She felt rather than heard him, felt the shift in the air, the tension of someone who wanted to speak but didn't know how. She turned slowly. He looked older, not by age, by something else, something in his eyes, like he'd seen things money couldn't fix. He stared at her with a stunned disbelief that softened into something far more complicated. "Grace!" His voice was quiet, but it struck her like a bell. Her throat tightened. "Michael!" His gaze dropped to the little girl beside her. Lily blinked up at him with innocent curiosity, her cheeks bright from the cold, the lights reflecting in her eyes. A silence thickened between the three of them. Michael's jaw clenched softly. "Is she?" Grace stepped back instinctively, blocking Lily without even thinking. "That's none of your business," she said, voice steadier than she felt. Michael flinched, not from anger, but from hurt. Before anything more could be said, Lily tugged at Grace's coat. "Mom, I'm hungry." Grace hesitated, wanting to pull her daughter away from this moment, from the man who had once broken her heart simply by not knowing she'd needed him. But Lily's big eyes and shy smile were impossible to ignore. And Michael saw it. Saw the need. Saw the struggle. Saw the truth hidden in every exhausted line on Grace's face. He stepped forward slightly, clearing his throat. There's a small cafe right there. Warm food. Hot chocolate. His voice softened. Let me help. Grace shook her head fast. No, we're fine. But her voice cracked on the last word. Michael heard it. Lily's stomach growled again. Loud, traitorously loud. Grace closed her eyes, mortified. If you were there in this moment, seeing a mother trying to shield her child while holding herself together, what would you have done? Be honest and comment your answer. And if it's hard to find the right words, just tap like to show that compassion still matters in moments like this. Grace inhaled sharply and tried to pull Lily away, but Michael gently stepped aside, blocking the cold wind, not her path. Grace, he said quietly, please, just let me buy her dinner. Grace's hand trembled around Lily's. She didn't answer, not yet, because the past she'd run from had just caught up to her, wearing a coat that cost more than her monthly rent. And she had no idea what to do next. Grace didn't answer him at first. Her breath clouded in the cold air as she stared down at the slush-covered ground, trying to untangle the fear and pride knotted inside her. Around them, the Christmas show continued, music rising, lights pulsing, but it all felt distant, like she was listening from underwater. Lily, unaware of the emotional battlefield surrounding her, rocked gently from foot to foot, trying to keep warm. She looked up at her mother, then at the tall stranger whose coat probably cost more than everything Grace owned. Mom, she whispered, my fingers are cold. Grace dug in her pocket quickly, pulling out thin gloves with stretched seams. She slipped them onto Lily's hands one by one. There, she murmured. Better. Lily nodded, even though her smile wobbled from the cold. Michael watched quietly. No judgment, no arrogance, just something like guilt flickering in his eyes. He glanced at Lily again, studying her small face, the curve of her cheeks, the delicate shape of her nose, features that looked far too familiar. Grace, he said again, voice low. Please, let me help. She finally looked at him, really looked. The polished shoes, the expensive coat, the elegant scarf, all reminders of a life she'd once touched but never truly belonged to. A life she'd walked away from because she thought she had no choice. You can't just show up out of nowhere, she whispered, voice trembling. You can't step back into a life you left. It doesn't work that way. His brow tightened. You left, Grace. You disappeared. Not here, she cut him off quickly, glancing at Lily. Not in front of her. Michael swallowed, throat bobbing. Lily tugged her hand again. Mom, can we please go somewhere warm? The simple plea broke something in Grace. She hesitated for a beat too long, and that was all the permission Michael needed. There, he said softly, pointing toward a small cafe at the corner, glowing golden through frosted windows. We can sit inside. No pressure, just warmth. For her. Grace closed her eyes. For her. It was always for her. She exhaled shakily. Fine. Her voice barely reached the air. Just for tonight. Michael nodded once, grateful, not triumphant. He walked a respectful distance beside them. Not too close, not trying to speak. Just there. And that somehow made it worse. Because the silence gave Grace room to hear her own thoughts. Thoughts she had been avoiding for years. When they reached the cafe door, Michael stepped ahead to hold it open. Warmth rushed out, smelling of cinnamon, baked bread, and melted chocolate. Lily's whole face lit up. Inside, soft music played. A couple sat by the window sharing a dessert. A teenage boy wiped down tables with a cloth that smelled faintly of vanilla. Michael motioned to an empty booth near the back. You can sit where you like. Grace hesitated, then guided Lily toward the booth. The cracked leather seats felt heavenly compared to the freezing outside. Lily climbed in eagerly, swinging her legs beneath the table. Michael remained standing a second longer, as if waiting for permission to join them. Grace gave a tight nod. He sat slowly. Silence hung awkwardly between them until a young waitress approached with a bright smile. What can I get you? Michael looked at Lily first. What would you like? Lily froze. She wasn't used to choosing things. Grace stepped in gently. Just a kid's hot chocolate. And one sandwich to share. Michael shook his head subtly and turned back to the waitress. She'll have the kid's hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. And whatever meal she wants. And he paused and glanced at Grace. 2 warm dinners, please. Grace tensed. We don't need. It's okay, Michael murmured. Just let me do this. His voice wasn't commanding. It wasn't arrogant. It was pleading. The waitress scribbled quickly and whisked away. Lily looked between them curiously, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Mom. Grace forced a smile. It's okay, baby. Let's just warm up. Okay. But as soon as Lily turned away, pressing her hands against the warm mug of water the waitress had left on the table, Grace leaned in slightly toward Michael. You think you can fix things with a meal, she whispered sharply. You don't even know what you're stepping into. Michael didn't flinch. Then tell me. I'm here. I'm listening. Grace shook her head, staring at the condensation forming on her side of the window. Outside, snow drifted softly past the glass like tiny ghosts of all the things she'd never said. Have you ever had someone step in to help you at a moment when you didn't expect anyone to? If that memory still warms your heart, write yes below and tell me the name of the person. Gratitude can travel farther than you think. Michael leaned back slightly, eyes softening. How have you been, Grace? He asked quietly. She let out a bitter laugh. You don't want the real answer. I do, he said. I really do. 4 years. Her eyes finally snapped to him. You had all my numbers, my email, everything. And you never. I did look, he cut in, voice tightening. You were gone. Completely gone. You changed addresses, changed numbers. You vanished. Grace's breath hitched. Her heart sped up. This was dangerous territory, fragile, trembling, filled with truth she had buried. She opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment, the waitress returned with Lily's hot chocolate, piled with marshmallows and topped with a swirl of whipped cream that made the little girl gasp. Her tiny thank you was barely above a whisper. Grace watched her daughter take the first careful sip, eyes closing in bliss, and her chest tightened. This was the first real hot chocolate Lily had ever tasted in her life. Michael watched her too. His expression softened so deeply it almost hurt to look at. When his gaze returned to Grace, it held a question he didn't dare speak aloud. A question she wasn't ready to answer yet. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But the truth was inching closer, the way old secrets do. And Grace knew, one way or another, everything she'd run from was about to come crashing to the surface. Grace watched Lily sip her hot chocolate with both hands wrapped around the mug, tiny shoulders relaxing as warmth seeped into her bones. That single image, her daughter finally experiencing something normal, something simple and sweet, pulled at Grace more fiercely than she expected. Michael watched too, but not in a performative way. There was something raw, almost aching, in the way his eyes followed the little girl. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, as if he wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent. You disappeared, he said finally, voice low. I'm not trying to accuse you. I need to understand. Grace's jaw tightened. She turned her gaze to the window again, watching families walk by outside, laughing, bundled in new coats, carrying paper bags filled with gifts. A life she'd once brushed against. A life she'd been afraid of drowning in. Not tonight, she whispered. Michael nodded slowly, accepting it for now. But he didn't look away. Okay, then tell me this. Are you safe? Are you and she safe? Something warm and sharp twisted inside Grace. Concern from him, after all this time, felt strange. She wasn't used to being cared about anymore. We're fine, she said. A lie, but one she wore well. Lily looked up then, whipped cream dotting her upper lip. Mom, can I have a sandwich now? Grace nodded and offered a weak smile. It's coming soon, sweetheart. The little girl giggled at the mustache of cream and wiped it with her sleeve. Michael's lips twitched into the softest smile. She's really sweet, he murmured. Grace stiffened. She's just a kid. She's a lot more than that, Michael said quietly. I can see that already. His eyes flicked to the small gap between Lily's front teeth when she grinned, then to the way her eyebrows arched when she concentrated on sipping carefully. Little details only someone searching for familiarity would notice. Grace's heartbeat thudded unevenly. She needed to shift the conversation, fast. So, she said, keeping her voice steady, what are you doing here, in this part of the city? Michael hesitated. Business dinner nearby. I stepped out to walk a bit, clear my head. Didn't expect, his voice trailed off. Didn't expect to run into you. Grace stared at him, searching his face for cracks, anything that might show what he was thinking. But he was too composed, too controlled. He always had been. The waitress returned, setting down a warm plate of chicken tenders and fries in front of Lily, then 2 steaming bowls for Grace and Michael, creamy pasta with herbs and shaved parmesan. Enjoy your meals, she said, cheerful as ever. Lily's eyes widened as though she'd been served treasure. Mom, look. Grace forced a smile. Eat slowly, remember. But Lily grabbed a forkful instantly, blowing on it before taking a huge bite. Her hum of delight was so genuine, so full, it made something in Grace's chest wobble dangerously. Michael watched as if witnessing a miracle. She's been hungry, he said softly, not asking, realizing. Grace felt shame rush up her neck, burning hot against her cold skin. She's fine, she insisted, more sharply than intended. Michael lowered his gaze. Grace, it's okay to accept help. No, she whispered, gripping her fork. Help comes with strings, or it disappears when you need it most. His eyes flicked up at her, hurt, confused, but patient. Lily didn't notice any of it. She just kept eating, savoring each bite like she was memorizing a new taste. After a few minutes, Michael cleared his throat. Does she go to school around here? Grace nodded slowly. Public school a couple blocks from our place. Is she happy? Does she have friends? Grace hesitated, glancing at Lily. She tries. She's quiet. She doesn't seem shy. Grace's eyes softened. She's not. But kids notice things. Clothes, lunches, shoes. They notice when someone doesn't have what they have. Michael's expression darkened with an emotion he couldn't hide, guilt that didn't belong to him, yet somehow did. Lily suddenly looked up. Mommy, this is the best dinner ever. Grace's breath caught. The innocence in her voice, the way she said ever like she meant it. God, it hurt. Michael swallowed hard. His voice lowered. Does she get dinners often? Grace didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. And that's when the weight of the scene settled like a heavy blanket. One warm meal revealing years of struggle. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you've done recently. Write it in the comments so others remember that kindness still exists. Your story might brighten someone's night more than you know. Grace gently brushed crumbs from Lily's cheek. Slow down, she whispered. Lily nodded, chewing happily. Michael watched the exchange with an expression Grace didn't recognize. Not pity, not judgment, something deeper. Something pulling him toward truths he wasn't ready to admit. He set his fork down slowly. Grace, I need to ask again. Is she? Grace's eyes snapped up sharply. Stop. Then when? Michael's voice cracked quietly. Because I'm standing here looking at her, and I. Not here, Grace whispered, trembling. Not like this. Lily blinked between them, sensing tension. Mommy. Grace forced a steady breath and smiled weakly. Finish your food, love. Michael leaned back, rubbing his hands together slowly, as if grounding himself. He stared at Lily again, long enough for Grace to see pain flicker across his face. He was piecing it together. Every familiar trait, every gap in the timeline, every fear she'd buried 6 years ago. And Grace knew. The truth was about to break open. Grace felt the walls closing in, even though the cafe was warm and spacious. The chandelier lights above their booth glowed softly, casting a golden halo over Lily's small head as she finished her meal with pure, innocent joy. Every giggle, every satisfied little hum from her daughter made Grace's chest ache with a mix of love and guilt. Michael sat across from them, hands clasped loosely, his posture relaxed but his eyes burning with questions he was trying and failing to hold back. The quiet between them wasn't peaceful. It was thick, heavy, trembling with unspoken truths. Finally, he said, "Grace, you owe me at least the truth. Not for me. For her." Grace's jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide what I owe." "I'm not trying to control you," he murmured. "I'm trying to understand. You vanished from my life overnight. No explanation. Nothing. You were just gone." She flinched. A memory flashed in her mind. Standing at the doorway of his penthouse, hands shaking, heart breaking, knowing what she had to do. She shoved the image away. Lily wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and grinned. "Mommy, I'm full." Grace leaned over, brushing crumbs from her sweater. "Good, baby." Michael watched her tuck a loose curl behind Lily's ear. His gaze softened again, almost painfully. "She looks like you," he whispered. Grace's heart stopped. Lily, oblivious, played with a leftover fry, pretending it was a sled sliding across the plate. "Grace, she has your eyes," he said quietly. "But her smile, that's mine." Grace's pulse pounded in her ears. "Don't," she breathed. "Please don't." Michael leaned forward, voice trembling for the first time all night. "Why didn't you tell me?" Grace swallowed hard, but before she could respond, Lily looked up and asked, "Mommy, who is he?" Grace froze. Michael's breath hitched. Time stopped. After a moment that felt like a lifetime, Grace forced a small smile. "Is an old friend." Lily nodded innocently and went back to playing with her fry. Michael exhaled shakily. "An old friend," he repeated under his breath, not hiding how much the words hurt. Grace felt her chest tighten with guilt. She hadn't lied entirely. Once, he was her best friend, her safe place, her future. But life hadn't let that future happen. The waitress came back to check on them, but one look at their faces told her not to interrupt. She left quietly. Michael rubbed a hand over his face. "Grace, do you think I wouldn't have wanted her? Do you think I would have walked away?" Grace closed her eyes. "You don't know what was happening back then." "Then tell me," he insisted. "Please." She looked out the window again, snow falling in gentle spirals, as if the night was trying to hush the world. For a split second, she remembered the girl she had once been, running from a life that suffocated her, even as she loved the man in it. "I was drowning," she whispered. Michael stilled. "In your world. In the expectations. The cameras. Your father." Her voice cracked. "I wasn't strong enough." His expression shifted. Pain, shock, realization. "If you'd told me." "I did." Grace's voice shook. "You didn't see it." He swallowed hard. "I was trying to fix things for us. You were trying to fix your father's empire." Michael flinched. The silence between them sharpened. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Lily looked up, confused but trusting, her eyes flicking between them. "Mommy, you okay?" Grace held her daughter's hand under the table. "I'm okay, baby." Lily smiled and leaned into her side. Michael watched the small moment with an expression of longing so deep it made Grace's throat tighten. Have you ever done something kind, something small, that made someone else's world feel bigger for a moment? Share it below. You never know whose heart your story might touch tonight. Grace cleared her throat and redirected her attention. "We should go soon. It's getting late." Michael straightened, panic flickering in his eyes. "Wait, can we talk outside?" Without her hearing. Grace hesitated. "She's tired." "There's a bench right outside the window," he said gently. "She can sit in the cafe and stay warm. We'll be right in view." Grace hated that he was being reasonable. Hated that part of her wanted to give him the chance he was asking for. Hated that the truth was clawing its way out whether she liked it or not. Lily yawned, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, can I draw? They have crayons at the counter." Grace forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you." "Okay." Lily nodded and hopped out of the booth, skipping toward the counter with the bright jar of crayons. Grace watched her settle at a tiny table near the window. Safe, warm, visible. Michael stood slowly. Grace followed him toward the exit, heart thudding. The cold air hit them the second the cafe door closed behind them. It carried the scent of pine, snow, and distant music. The square was quieter now. The crowd had thinned. Michael shoved his hands into his coat pockets. Grace, I need the truth. All of it. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, staring at her boots half buried in slush. Fine, she whispered. But you need to hear the beginning, not the ending. Michael nodded, bracing himself. Grace inhaled shakily. When I left, I was pregnant. I found out the same day your father told me I didn't belong in your life. Michael's breath punched out in the cold air. And you believed him, he whispered, shaking. I believed you would choose him over a future with me, she said softly. And I wasn't going to let your world swallow my child. Michael stepped back as if struck. His eyes shone, not from cold. Grace, his voice broke. She's mine. Grace didn't deny it. She couldn't. And the truth shattered the night. Michael stood frozen on the sidewalk, snow catching in his hair, melting against the warmth of his skin. The world around them kept moving, cars humming, people laughing as they passed, but his gaze was locked on Grace as if the universe had shrunk to just the two of them. She's mine, he repeated, voice trembling. Grace, why didn't you tell me? Grace wrapped her arms tighter around herself, her breath shaky. Because your father made it clear I wasn't welcome in your life. And I believed him. I believed he'd destroy me and her if I didn't disappear. Michael shook his head, pain flickering across his features. You should have come to me. I would have protected you. You couldn't even protect yourself from him, she whispered. That struck deep. Michael closed his eyes. He had been younger then, ambitious, naive, desperate to prove himself in his father's empire. He remembered the endless meetings, the pressure, the cold expectations. And he remembered Grace, slipping away emotionally, even before she physically disappeared. But he never knew why. Until now, the truth stood between them like a fragile, burning candle, small, but impossible to ignore. He stepped closer. Let me meet her properly. Grace's breath caught. Not tonight. I'm her father. And I'm her mother, she shot back softly. The one who stayed. The one who fed her, carried her, protected her, raised her, alone. Michael flinched, guilt slamming into him with the force of a decade. I'm not asking to take her away, he said quietly. I lost 6 years. I don't want to lose another second. Grace looked away, blinking back, the heat rising behind her eyes. Inside the cafe, Lily was drawing with a blue crayon, tongue poking out the corner of her mouth. She was safe. She was happy. She had no idea her world was cracking open. Grace pressed her fingertips to her lips, trying to steady her breath. The winter air burned cold in her lungs. You don't understand what it was like, she said softly. I had no money, no support, no place to go. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I slept on floors. I skipped meals. I carried her through everything while trying not to collapse. Michael swallowed hard. I would have helped. You weren't there, she whispered. And you didn't look. He stiffened. I did look. Grace frowned. What do you mean? Michael exhaled, shaking his head. I hired a private investigator. I went to your old building. Your job. I called hospitals. I asked your friends. No one knew anything. It was like you had been erased. Her stomach dropped. I changed my name for a while. Michael's eyes widened. Why? Because your father threatened me. Michael, Grace said, voice trembling. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten violence. He just smiled and said people like me ruin men like you. And I knew he'd do whatever it took to get me out of your life. So I disappeared before he could. The truth hit Michael so hard that he staggered back a step. My God, he whispered. Grace, I'm so sorry. She hugged herself tighter. I didn't tell you because I was scared. And proud. And stupid. He shook his head fiercely. You were surviving. Grace laughed bitterly. Barely. The wind brushed past them, carrying the distant sound of a careless song. Snowflakes drifted down, catching in Grace's hair like tiny diamonds. Michael reached out, hesitating, then gently touched her sleeve. Please, let me make this right. Grace stared at his hand, then into his eyes, the same deep, steady brown she once trusted without question. Right? She whispered. You can't erase the years I cried myself to sleep holding her. You can't erase the birthdays I celebrated with homemade cupcakes because I had $10 to my name. You can't erase how many nights I lay awake terrified she'd get sick because I had no insurance. He swallowed, guilt tightening his voice. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be part of her future. Grace's eyes softened despite the storm inside her. She'd imagined this moment. Him finding out, him asking to be involved, so many times. In her nightmares, it ended with him taking Lily away. In her daydreams, he held her daughter with love. Reality was somewhere in between. Inside, Lily spotted them through the window. She waved excitedly, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, and one small, all holding hands under a big crooked star. Grace's heart nearly stopped. Michael saw it too. His breath hitched. Is that us? Grace swallowed hard. She likes drawing families, she murmured. Even one she only imagines. Michael pressed a hand to the glass without realizing. His eyes watered. I want to know her, he whispered. I want her to know me. Grace trembled. Michael, I'm scared. He stepped closer. So am I. They stood there, 2 people broken in different ways, both staring at the little girl who unknowingly held their futures in her tiny hands. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one small symbol says what your voice can't. Michael wiped his eyes quickly and looked at Grace. Let me take you both home tonight, just to make sure you're safe. Grace hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse, to stay invisible, to protect what little stability she had built. But the truth was, she was tired of running. She was tired of pretending she didn't need help. She was tired of being alone. Grace exhaled softly. Okay, but just the ride. Michael nodded gently, as if afraid to break the fragile peace forming between them. Just the ride, he repeated. They walked back toward the cafe door, snow crunching under their feet. But deep down, both of them knew. Nothing about tonight would end simply. Michael pushed open the cafe door, and warm air washed over them again. Lily looked up from her little table, waving her crayon-stained fingers proudly. Mommy, look, I drew us, she said, lifting the paper higher. Grace managed a soft smile. It's beautiful, Lily. Michael's gaze lingered on the drawing. A small family of 3, all holding hands. His throat tightened. He'd missed every moment that led to this innocent picture. First words, first steps, first teeth, first days of school, first everything. He blinked hard. Lily scooted off her chair and ran to Grace, clutching the drawing. Can we go home now? It's late. Grace nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Yes, sweetheart. Michael cleared his throat gently. I'll drive you both. My car's right outside. Lily glanced up at him. Are you Mommy's friend? The question made Grace stiffen. But Michael knelt down to Lily's height, his voice soft yet steady. I'd like to be, if she lets me. Lily looked at her mother, waiting for approval. Grace nodded gently. It's okay. A small, shy smile formed on Lily's lips. Okay. They gathered their things. Lily's coat with a missing button, Grace's fraying scarf. Michael held the door for them as they stepped back into the cold. Snowflakes fluttered down, landing on Lily's hair. She giggled when one melted on her nose. Michael led them to a sleek black car parked at the curb. A driver stood beside it, holding the door open respectfully. Grace froze. I can't, she shook her head. We don't belong in cars like that. Michael softened. It's just a ride, Grace. A warm one. Lily tugged her coat. Mommy, please. Grace sighed and nodded, though discomfort shadowed her expression. The driver helped Lily climb inside. She gasped at the plush leather seats, running her fingers over the stitching as though touching a cloud. Grace slid in next to her, careful not to leave marks on the immaculate interior. Michael sat across from them, facing them in the spacious back seat. The car glided forward silently. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the light stream past. "It's so warm," she whispered. Grace glanced at her daughter, heart aching. Something as simple as a warm car shouldn't have been a surprise to a 6-year-old. Michael noticed. "Grace, where do you live now?" She hesitated. "A small apartment. It's nothing special." "Is it safe?" After a pause, she answered honestly. "Mostly." His jaw tightened. "Mostly isn't good enough." Grace bristled. "Don't start trying to fix everything. We've survived." "I don't want you to just survive," Michael said softly. "Either of you." Grace looked away, watching streetlights blur into streaks of gold through the window. Lily climbed onto her knees and peered through the divider at the driver. "Does this car fly?" she asked earnestly. The driver chuckled softly. "Not yet, little one." Lily giggled and turned back to her drawing, adding a tiny star above the stick figure family. Michael smiled faintly, then shifted his gaze toward Grace again. "I need to ask, what happened after you left? Where did you go first?" Grace's stomach tightened. "You don't want to know." "I do." She inhaled slowly, the memories clawing their way up her throat. "I stayed at a shelter for the first few weeks. I was too far along to hide the pregnancy. People stared. Some judged, but the volunteers were kind. They knew I was scared." Michael's hands clenched. "You were pregnant, alone, in a shelter." Grace nodded, eyes glistening. "I didn't have money. I didn't have a job. I didn't want anyone to find me." "Grace," his voice cracked with something like heartbreak. "I should have been there." She swallowed. "I know." The car fell silent. Only Lily's soft humming filled the space as she drew tiny snowflakes on the corner of the page. The image burned in Michael's mind. Grace, pregnant, terrified, abandoned. Not by choice, but by circumstance, by fear, by the belief that he wouldn't fight for her. He pressed a hand to his forehead. "I failed you." Grace shook her head quickly. "No, you didn't know. But I should have," he whispered. "I should have seen you slipping away." The pain on his face was raw, real, and for the first time, Grace realized he had carried his own grief all these years. Before she could respond, the car slowed. "We're almost there," Grace murmured, pointing at a narrow street. Michael peered out and felt his heart sink. The buildings were old, peeling paint, broken streetlights, a row of dumpsters lining the alley. This wasn't a place for a child, or anyone. The car parked beside a dimly lit entrance. Lily looked around, her smile shrinking. "Home." Grace nodded gently. "Yes, baby." Michael swallowed hard. "Grace, you and she deserve better." Grace sighed. "Maybe, but this is what we have." Michael leaned forward. "It doesn't have to stay this way." Grace stiffened. "Michael." "Please," he whispered. "Let me help. Let me make up for at least a fraction of what I missed." Her throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to refuse, protect, withdraw, run. But deep inside, exhaustion tugged at her bones. She couldn't keep shielding Lily from the world forever, or from her father. Still, her voice shook as she whispered, "I don't know if I can trust you yet." Michael nodded. "Then let me earn it." Grace opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Lily climbed out first, clutching her drawing. Grace paused on the sidewalk, snow settling on her shoulders. The old fear rose again. Fear that one day Lily might look at her and blame her for keeping Michael away. Fear that forgiveness might cost more than she could bear. Be honest. Could you forgive after everything he didn't know? Everything she endured alone? Type forgive if you could. Or never if your heart would break too deeply. Grace turned back to Michael. He stood in the doorway of the car, waiting, not pushing. She took a shaky breath. "This isn't over," she whispered. Michael exhaled with relief. "I know." Grace held Lily's hand, and together, they walked toward the worn-down doorway, Michael watching with a mixture of hope, fear, and a determination that hadn't been there 6 years ago. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving him alone in the falling snow, and knowing tonight had changed everything. Inside the dim apartment, the thin hallway light flickered twice before holding steady. Grace locked the door behind them. The old metal clicked loudly in the silence, a reminder of the life she had built out of scraps and stubbornness. Lily, still holding her drawing, leaned against Grace's side. "Mommy, that man was nice," she murmured. Grace swallowed. "Yeah," she whispered, untying Lily's scarf. "He was." Nice wasn't the word she feared. Nice was safe. Nice was distant. But Michael wasn't distant anymore. Grace helped Lily change into her pajamas, pink cotton ones with faded stars. The bottoms were a little short. Lily had grown again. Too fast. Faster than Grace could keep up. "Mommy," Lily whispered, glancing up. "Is he really your friend?" Grace hesitated, brushing her daughter's hair gently. He used to be." Lily blinked slowly. "Did he make you smile?" Grace froze, fingers tangled in soft brown curls. "Once. He did. More than anyone had before or after." "Yeah," she murmured. "Once." Lily yawned and curled onto her mattress on the floor, pulling a thin blanket over herself. Grace tucked her in tight, smoothing her hair. "Sleep, my love." Within minutes, Lily's breath softened, deepened, becoming the steady rhythm Grace relied on to remind herself she was still doing okay, still standing, still fighting. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Michael's face flashed again in her mind. Shocked, wounded, desperate. She'd expected anger. She'd braced for accusations. But what she saw instead was pain. And love. And a heartbreaking mix of everything in between. She pressed her palms to her eyes. The truth was out now. There was no putting it back. After Lily slept, Grace rose quietly and stepped into the tiny kitchenette, grabbing an old coat and slipping outside. She needed air. Cold, sharp, grounding air. Snow crunched beneath her thin boots. She wrapped her arms around herself and walked toward the small bench near the streetlight at the end of the block. The bulb flickered above her, humming faintly. She didn't expect to see anyone. But someone was there, sitting on the bench, head in his hands. Michael looked up the moment she approached, breath forming white clouds in the air. His eyes, raw, unprotected, met hers instantly. "You came out," he murmured, voice hoarse. Grace hugged herself tighter. "I needed space. To think." He nodded, looking down again. Snowflakes settled onto his coat. "I didn't want to drive off," he admitted softly. "Not when I didn't know if you were okay." Grace inhaled shakily. "Michael, I don't know if I can do this. If I can let you in again." He didn't flinch. "I know. You're a stranger to her," she whispered. "She doesn't know who you are, and I don't know if I'm strong enough for whatever happens next." Snow drifted down like quiet applause. Michael lifted his gaze, eyes shining. "Grace, I'm not asking for everything at once. I don't deserve that. I just want a starting point." His breath caught. "I want to be there. I want to help. I want to know what she likes, what scares her, what makes her laugh. I want to earn her trust, not as some rich man buying dinners, but as her father." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her, something old, brittle, made of years of exhaustion. She stepped closer. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why after all this time?" Michael hesitated, then spoke with brutal honesty. "Because the moment I saw her, it felt like someone handed me a missing piece of my soul. And I can't walk away from that. Not again." Grace exhaled, breath trembling. The wind picked up, swirling snow around them. The streetlight buzzed. Somewhere, a dog barked in the distance. Michael rubbed his hands together for warmth. "Grace, let me help you move to a safer place. Somewhere warm. Somewhere she can grow without fear." Grace shook her head quickly. "I'm not taking money from you." "It's not about money," he whispered. "It's about safety. For her. For you." She didn't respond. He leaned forward slightly. "Then let me help in other ways. Let me pick her up from school. Let me buy her winter boots. Let me be the one she draws in her pictures, right beside you." Grace closed her eyes. Those words pierced deep. "I'm scared," she repeated quietly. Michael nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "So am I." A long silence stretched between them, heavy but not suffocating. Finally, Grace opened her eyes. "If we try this, if we let you into her life, it can't just be when it's convenient. You can't disappear." Michael's expression shifted, determination settling in like steel. I won't. You promise things easily, Grace whispered. Not anymore, he said softly. Not unless I mean them. Grace studied him, his trembling hands, the rawness in his eyes, the snow melting in his hair. She didn't trust him yet, but she believed him, maybe for the first time. If you believe that love, in all its broken pieces, still has a chance to win, comment, Amen. Let this little corner of the internet glow with hope. Someone passing by might need to see it tonight. Grace stepped closer to him, snow crunching softly. Tomorrow, she whispered. We can meet tomorrow. At Lily's school. I'll introduce you, slowly. Michael's breath escaped in a shaky exhale. Thank you. She shook her head. Don't thank me yet. He stood slowly, smoothing his coat, and for a moment they just stared at each other, two different worlds standing in the same falling snow. Good night, Grace, he said softly. Grace turned toward her building, her voice barely a whisper. Good night, Michael. As she walked away, she felt the weight of the night settle into her bones, not heavy, but meaningful. Behind her, Michael remained under the streetlight, watching until she disappeared inside. For the first time in years, Grace felt something warm unfurl quietly inside her chest. Hoped up. The next morning arrived quietly, with pale winter sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of Grace's small bedroom. She woke before her alarm, the memories of last night stirring in her chest like warm embers, soft, glowing, frightening. For a moment she simply lay there, listening to Lily's soft breathing beside her. Her daughter slept curled into a tiny ball, blanket kicked halfway off. Grace tucked it gently around her and brushed a hand across her cheek. This little girl had been her whole world for 6 years. And now, someone else wanted to step into that world. Someone who had every right to. Grace rose quietly and began preparing breakfast, toast and a small banana she'd saved for Lily. She placed the plate on the table as Lily shuffled out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Mommy, she mumbled. Good morning, sweetheart. Grace kissed the top of her head. Eat up. We're walking to school today. Lily perked up instantly. Will your friend be there? Grace hesitated at the word friend, her chest tightening. Maybe. Lily grinned, swinging her legs as she ate her toast. He was nice. Grace smiled softly. Yeah, he was. But inside her, the storm churned. Would Lily still think he was nice when she learned who he really was? Would she blame Grace for keeping him away? Would she run to him, leaving Grace behind? She tried to bury those thoughts. Today wasn't about her fears. Today was about letting truth in. When they stepped outside, the air was crisp but kinder than last night. Snow glittered on the sidewalks, crunching beneath their shoes. Grace held Lily's hand tightly as they walked the familiar route to school. Past the bakery that opened too late for them to ever afford fresh pastries. Past the pharmacy with a broken neon sign. Past the old library that Lily loved, but they seldom visited because it closed early. As they approached the school gates, Grace's breath caught. Michael was already there, not dressed in a suit, not with a driver or luxury car. He stood alone, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket, head tousled by the wind, eyes scanning the sidewalk until they landed on them. On Lily first, then Grace. Lily waved shyly. Michael's face lit up with a warmth Grace hadn't seen in years. Grace's stomach fluttered with nerves. This was it. The moment their worlds crashed together for real. Michael walked toward them slowly, giving Lily plenty of space. He knelt down when he reached her, voice gentle. Good morning, Lily. She smiled, holding up a drawing from last night. Look, I added snowflakes. He admired it as though she'd shown him a priceless painting. It's beautiful. Lily giggled and hid her face in Grace's coat. Grace exhaled softly. She's a little shy in the mornings. That's okay, Michael said, standing. She can take her time. So can we. Grace nodded, grateful he wasn't pushing. A soft bell rang in the distance. 5 minutes until the school opened. Lily tugged her mother's sleeve. Mommy. Yes, baby. Can he walk with us to the door? Grace froze. This was Lily's space. Her routine. Her tiny piece of normal. But Lily's hopeful eyes made something inside Grace melt. She looked at Michael. Are you okay with that? Michael swallowed hard. I'd be on it. They walked together across the snow-dusted pavement. Lily swung her drawing between them. Michael slowed his steps to match her small ones, careful not to crowd her. At the school entrance, Lily stopped. Mommy, can I give him a hug? Grace blinked, stunned. Lily had always been careful with affection. She hugged her mother easily, but strangers? Rarely. Michael's eyes widened with emotion. He knelt again. Only if you want to. Lily leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Michael froze, not from rejection, but from the overwhelming feeling of a connection he had once lost without ever knowing. He hugged her back with trembling hands. Thank you, he whispered, voice breaking. Lily pulled away with a smile. Bye. She ran through the school doors, turning once more to wave before disappearing inside. Grace felt tears burn behind her eyes. Michael stood slowly, wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand. She's incredible, he whispered. Grace nodded. She is. Michael turned to her, voice cracking. Grace, thank you. For letting me see her. For letting me start. Grace inhaled shakily. This doesn't mean everything is fixed. Or easy. I know, he said gently. But it's a beginning. Snow drifted around them again, softer this time, like the world was exhaling with relief. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold but from the weight of what came next. There's a lot we need to talk about. Whenever you're ready, Michael said. Your pace. It struck her then, how different he was. Not the young man balancing his father's empire, not the polished heir she'd once feared losing herself in. He was just Michael, a man standing in the cold, wanting to learn how to be a father. For the first time, Grace let the possibility settle into her heart. Maybe people could change. Maybe broken things could be rebuilt. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a door slammed shut, but one creaking open, little by little. And if this story has moved you even a little, don't scroll away silently. Tap like, not for me, but for the mother who carried the weight alone, and the father trying to make things right. One small click can be your quiet way of saying, I felt this. I really felt this. Grace looked at Michael, really looked, and whispered, we can try. For her. Michael's eyes softened with gratitude, humility, hope. For her, he echoed. They stood side by side, snow falling around them, two people with a painful past, and maybe, just maybe, a gentler future. And the moral? Sometimes life breaks us apart in the exact places we need to grow. Sometimes the people we lose return when our hearts are finally ready. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the first quiet step toward healing.